So, welcome to Testimony Mountain. It's such a joy and a privilege to be here with Veronica Swift. If any of you are not aware of her, I just absolutely love her blogs. And her first book, The Illuminati Primer, is so good. It really, really helped me to understand a lot more, as well as I think it's a great book to share with others because she comes from a perspective of being kind of on the outside looking in. And so where a lot of people doubt Survivor's story, her book just comes from a place of an outside perspective that I so appreciate and I really think is helpful in getting the word out. And so anyway, it's just a joy to be here with Veronica. We're going to have fun just having a conversation. I've already just had such a wonderful time conversing, and you all get to join in with the conversation. And so Veronica and I had some emails back and forth recently about just prayer needs and different things, and a prayer that I shared with Veronica that has been powerful in both of our lives. And so we just want to share a little bit about that. And so I just want to welcome you, Veronica, and anything you want to share is for introduction.
I'm delighted to be here. It's really so very, very nice to speak with you in person. And it's exciting, this little journey of podcasting versus just typing.
Yes.
So it's nice. Yeah, I thought that prayer that you shared. So I think it was November, I finally I usually do a year wrap-up blog. And I do it from the time that I first started learning about SRA and I first started learning about the Brotherhood and that, initial jaw-dropping, absolute shock, this can't be real, but it is real because, oh my goodness, sort of moment, which was in October of 2020. So I usually write a wrap-up like mid to late October. And this year I just couldn't do it and I couldn't do it. And everything I wrote, I discarded 3 or 4 and finally got around to writing it in November. And just, I'm a very private person. So I don't like to put myself out there very much. And I haven't. But usually in the year wrap up, I'll say little bits and pieces about what's happened to me, etc. And I just thought, well, I'm going to go for it. I might as well just lay it all out because this year's been crap on a cracker. So I kind of did that and was really surprised at the response that I got because, like we chatted just a little bit before, I'm behind a computer all the time. Like, I'm opening files and downloading stuff and listening to videos and by myself and learning. And it's hard to know what's out there beyond or how you're impacting someone beyond what you're doing on a daily basis. So it was really lovely. I got a lot of lovely, lovely feedback and some really powerful strategies. And one of them was this prayer that you sent me. Another one was a book that I was sent from someone who'd been trying to get me to watch a podcast of the same gentleman who I just hadn't had time to do that one quite yet because there's a lot of my backlog list at this point. So, but both of those were excellent. I think also I come from a background where none of this stuff was real. And that's the common perception of the public is that, Satan isn't real. Lucifer isn't real. Demons aren't real. They're imagined. They're imagined, they're hypothetical, they're old world, they don't exist now. Giants, well, we don't talk about those in church. Who talks about that in church? We have lunch and we talk about pleasant things and then we go home and struggle through our lives with all this stuff that's probably hitting us so that we don't really know about. So, yeah, it's kind of been a journey learning about self-protection, spiritual warfare, how to do it. What is spiritual warfare? How do you identify when you're being attacked by an evil spirit? And I've had all that stuff happen. In my sleep, in daylight, through my through my computer, through the mouse, you name it. I've probably had it happen since I started writing about this because guess what? the enemy doesn't like people knowing about it, right? So again, not something that I really realized in the beginning because I was more focused on, I got to understand this. I don't get this stuff. What is this? This is so wild to me. Like I'm like, woo. It's an adventure in the beginning and then it's a war.
Yes.
So if you're escaping the brotherhood or the occult or a cult, it's a war.
Yeah.
Like there's a war on for the person's soul, for your spirit, for your, identity almost. And that's certainly become really evident to me. So I'd had people, I'd had all these attacks. I'd had attacks on my family, on my close relatives. I'd had attacks on my my mental state. I'd had attacks on the equipment. I'm like, boy, they're going to come at me from every single angle they can possibly come. And in the beginning, I thought, I'm not talking about this to anybody because I'm afraid if I say out loud exactly what they've been successful with, they'll just double down and come after me again. Now that I'm a little more astute, I had a period of time where I went through 11 computer mice in a row.
Wow.
They got destroyed one after another, and I'm like, "This is ridiculous. 11 in a row? This is not possible. It can't be that." And then it didn't dawn on me till, like, number 11. "Oh, I get it. Now I get it. I get what's going on. Oh, you little buggers, you. Okay." So, that was the first time I started getting a little bit astute, and figuring out, "Hey, I gotta do something about this or I'm gonna lose my computer too," kind of a deal. So that was kind of the start of it. So this prayer though, what I love about this prayer that you sent is that it ups the game a lot.
Mhm.
I love creating my own prayers, but there's something powerful about someone else who's been much farther along in the warfare having
Yeah.
created a prayer. It seems like it's much more effective because it covers a lot of things. So this comes off of Restoration in Christ Ministries website, and it's by Diane, I think her name is Hawkins. Yeah,
Hawkins, yes.
Diane Hawkins. And I'll tell you, I actually have that site listed in my survivor resources on the blog. But I had whizzed right by this one because it says, quote, "It's for ministry leaders, staff, and volunteers." And my brain went zoom right by it, right? Because I'm not a ministry leader. I'm not a staff. I'm not a volunteer. I'm like, oh, you dork. It just went straight by me. But wow. So the enemy can like shield your own perception
Yes.
even from what you read. So when you sent it, I thought, oh, yeah. Okay. I get it. And then I read it and I'm like, wow. She includes stuff like, protecting your computer, printer, copier, server, internet, electronic equipment, electrical appliances, plumbing, heating, air conditioning, water, phone, power lines, wireless communication. I mean, it's just got everything covered. I thought, ooh, I really need this. I really need it. And boy, it really has helped. It really does help because even just speaking all those out loud is amazing. And then later on, this prayer is astonishing to me. It still kind of astonishes me because the thing she asks for protection from, I'm like, I don't even know what half of this stuff is. So, hybrid entities, spirits of whatever type, rank of elevation, combination or complexity, artificial entity, structure, devices, mechanisms of any kind, usurped power, forces, energy, light force, mist, winds, slimes, or crystals, or anything else from the realm of darkness. I mean, whoa. I don't even know what half that stuff is, to be quite honest.
And that's what's really helpful. Some people are against some of these prayers or renunciations that someone else has written. And, my point is someone's gone before and they know what all these things are that I don't know.
Right.
And I think that there is significance when we can address something specifically. And so, yeah, some of those things I go by faith. I've got a couple of prayers I use with clients, and there's one word in there that it's like, I don't even know what that is, and I haven't even looked it up. Fortunately, nobody's asked me so far what it is because I wouldn't know what to say.
Yeah, can you even look it up? I mean, maybe somebody's written about it, but
Yeah.
I might even with all the stuff I've amassed so far, like tens of thousands of documents, I don't even know if I'd find mists or, what else did they say? Slimes? I mean, slimes, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, woo, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'd even find that if I looked it up. So, thank goodness, right? Like, thank goodness someone's been through it and unfortunately had the experience that they did have or worked with someone who had that experience that she could actually put this together. So, bless Diane Hawkins and thank her so much for for this prayer. Wow.
And I actually have a new one I really am enjoying right now, that is not as in depth, but it has different nuances. And that's what's the beauty of the body of Christ is that, different prayers have different emphasis and different, little things. And one I'm enjoying right now is by Mary Lou Lake. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but another great resource.
No.
And I like the attitude in that she talks about the people who are coming against us or our ministry or whatever, um, about forgiving and releasing iniquity off of their bloodline.
Mm,
And she
yeah,
has just a beautiful way of wording it that to me is very redemptive and restorative, asking for their restoration in the midst of this. And that to me is ultimately the heart of the Lord is restoration for, those who are willing to receive it. And,
right,
um, the people who come against us, I personally believe are programmed themselves and have gone through a lot of the stuff that um, I and other survivors have gone through. And so there's a place of compassion because I could have been one of those.
right,
And so anyway, that's another resource, but it's a journey, and it's kind of interesting how you had some accumulative things in November, and I had some things come against me in December that were out of out of left field, and sometimes I get a little with the Lord, like a little warning would have been
been
helpful.
nice. Yeah, I had something like that happen in, earlier in the middle of 2023, and I'm like, "Really? Couldn't you given me, like, an hour's notice?" Because it would have been nice. Would have been nice. Then again, I find that lately, God seems to turn all this negative stuff to good, and I'm
Yes.
astonished. Just as because this was not my experience when I was a child, when
Mhm.
I was growing up, when I went through, however many years of the hell I lived through at times, I did not have the experience of God turning many things to good.
Mm.
So he does that. He's been doing that again and again and again. People come against me and I reply and it turns out to be such a good thing. People say, "Oh, wow. I'm really so happy that you did that." Like recently somebody said, "Well, you only do this." I'm like, "No, I really don't only do that. And here, I'll prove it to you. And here's, 50 plus instances where I haven't done that.
Mhm.
So let's just get real about it." And then I
Yes.
had a bunch of people email. I'm like, "Wow, I'm so excited about all this. I hadn't seen all that. I didn't know you'd written all these things." So that was one instance, but there have been others. So I find it really nice. You get to a point where even though you're walking through and pushing through, and somebody sent me a lovely video, that I'm only about halfway through, and I can't remember the guy's name, the minister's name, but the title of the video is called "The Law of Push." He
Mm.
says, "You just have to keep moving through it. You
Yeah.
push through it. You walk through the valley of the shadow of death. You don't sit down and wallow in it, right? You
Yes.
keep
Yes.
moving." So even if it feels like, everything has gone straight to pot, as long as you keep moving in some direction and take direction and ask for direction, what do I do next? Where do I go next? Eventually you get out the other side. Sometimes
Yes.
it takes decades to get out the other side.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that it's, our journey with the Lord in understanding that, yes, all of this yucky stuff from the enemy, from Satan, Lucifer, all of that is horrible. Yes, there is a level of power they have, but a lot of it is what we give them. And the more and more we're able to see God as more powerful and more redemptive, the journey is easier. And I
Yeah.
like to reframe things instead of, I'm just, "Ah,"
Yeah.
uh, but I'm safely held in the arms of God because I
Right.
believe that is always our position. We don't always realize it. Um, but that what comes is it is through his loving hands, even though we may not always feel it
Yeah.
loving, because he works all things for good. And, this last thing that I shared last time I was on Testimony Mountain,
Yeah.
um, I I see it as a severe mercy, um,
Right.
because in it the Lord has shown things in me that I did need to address, and including more prayer for myself and our ministry. And for many years before I even knew about my journey, I taught on prayer and actually a particular model for pastors and leaders where each day of the week, someone would fast and pray, and then a teammate would cover that. So kind of like the Roman
Mm.
shields, how they would be like this, and it's a really powerful prayer model. But probably 3 years ago, things, people were like, "Well, there's more kingdom ways to pray, and let's," And anyway, long story short, the team eventually just kind of disintegrated, and in that time, even the level of, uh, stuff between my husband and I and differences in belief and things have accelerated,
Mm.
and the Lord had been nudging me to go, "Hey, you need a prayer team. You need this covering."
Yeah.
And I just been like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm really busy. I'm helping all these people. I don't have, I don't have time for that."
Yeah.
And it is hard to ask for prayer from other people, and particularly a team like this. It's a big commitment, even though it's beautiful relationally because you're all praying for one
Right.
another and you're in it together.
Right.
Um, and so anyway, just this incident has pushed me into, at least to put out the invitation, and hopefully we'll have a meeting soon to establish that. But we really we really need the Lord, and we need one another as we walk through this. And the more we can
Absolutely.
open up to even receiving that is beautiful.
I've often thought that we heal in relationship, right?
Yes.
And I think and I'm not gonna quote this properly, but the passage in the Bible that says, "Confess your sins to one another."
Mhm.
And people focus on the first part of that passage, "Confess your sins." I think the second part is important, "To
Yes.
one another."
Yeah.
It's the one another part. He doesn't say confess them only to God or confess them only to Jesus or confess them only to your pastor or only to XYZ individual, to one another. Talk to one another because that's what heals.
Yes. And I don't know if you're familiar with Mike Bickle and the House of Prayer and the controversy that's going on right now with that. But I
Not
used
really,
to
no.
be part of the House of Prayer, and he was a powerful leader, but on the side doing other things. And I suspect he might be programmed. But that was kind of
Yeah,
the thing as the stories come out, is he just believed he could sin and just push delete and just
yeah,
confess his sins to the Lord, and that was enough. And it's
was
like,
sufficient, yeah,
no, when it's affecting other people, it needs to be brought into the light, and consequences of those need to be walked out in community. And
yeah.
um so yeah.
And then you've gotta stop. Then you've got to
Yeah.
stop doing it. That's the other
Yes.
part of it. You can't just confess it and then do it again tomorrow and then confess and do it again the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of people operate like that. I think it's a misconception of the process, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But if you are, if you're in that point where you go back to something again and again and again, there's always there's always redemption in the end when you get
Yes.
through the process, you know?
Yes.
You can relapse a thousand times, and it could be the 1,001st time that it finally works.
Yeah.
But, it's like Edison and the light bulb. You gotta keep going until you hit that whatever number it is that you don't wanna do the first, 1,000 times, but it might be the 1,001st that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you speaking in December was really powerful for a lot of people.
Mhm.
I do think it shows one of the things it showed is that you can be struck by just, ultimate feelings of ultimate failure at any point from anybody. It can be it can be from something someone says in love.
Mhm.
It can hit you the wrong way,
Yeah.
or it can trigger you because of something that you've gone through before in your life, or it can just be out of the blue. It doesn't seem to matter, but you can get these overwhelming, terrible, terrible downward shifts, like, down on a roller coaster kind of drops, but then you can come out of it as well. I've
Yes.
seen a lot of people do the drop into feelings of suicide,
Mhm.
and it's not real in the sense that it could be a demonic attack, it could be a trigger from your past, it could be a part that's been programmed. You don't know what's coming up, but in the end, what's real is life, not
Yes.
death.
Yes. And for me, it was interesting, and I can't remember if I've shared it on Testimony Mountain. I may or may not have, but several months ago, there was a part that um, came up with the realization of, having been tricked into killing a baby. And
Yeah.
it was just horrific and horrifying, just really agitated and trying to work through that. And then um, I thought, well, maybe if I read some scripture, and I do believe scripture reading can be very helpful and is helpful.
Mhm.
But for whatever reason, I opened it up to Matthew 18, which the beginning of it talks about, rightly so, how Jesus feels about those who harm his little ones,
Yeah.
and it says they should, have a millstone around their neck and be thrown
Yeah.
into the sea.
Mm.
And it triggered those parts that I think had been programmed with verses like that,
Yeah.
even in the assassin program and things like that is, you know, um, and so my parts were like, hey, even Jesus says we should be killed.
Mm.
And and even in communion with the Lord, it was a little bit of a struggle, and you just the Lord speaking forgiveness to me, but I wasn't able to forgive myself, and
Yeah.
wrestling with that.
Yeah.
Um, and ultimately, Jesus said, "Well, do you want to hear from those, whose life you took?" And I believe from the
Mm.
cloud of witnesses that He can allow us to hear from them. And it was so healing. They were there, and they were just like, "We love you. We forgive you. We're here in a good place, and
Yeah.
we're praying from you on on this side of eternity." And it just it brought finally a settledness, to my
Yeah.
heart, and being able to forgive myself. And um, just
That's amazing.
again,
Yeah.
no matter what the enemy has done, the Lord has a path of triumph if we're willing to walk it through,
Yep.
for everyone.
Yep. And it
But
doesn't have to be that severe either.
yeah,
One of the things I struggle with is like, goodness, I haven't been through anything that bad, and I still have my own problems. Do I have a right to feel this way,
yeah,
given that everybody's got just some hard, hard, hard stuff?
yeah,
So, but yeah, we all do.
it all matters, before the Lord, and whether it's little things or big things. And it's interesting what would trigger things, because suicide's not been a an issue the majority of my life, but there was a time
Right.
when I was 12 years old that um, my mom would make applesauce every year, and it's a big, I mean, we'd make 360 quarts of applesauce a
That's
year.
a lot of work.
And
That's a
so
lot of work.
it was usually a 2 or 3-day process, my brother and I, and my mom. And so I had a friend call and want to do something with me, and in a rare moment, my mom allowed me to choose, which wasn't super common back then, and I chose to go with my friends, and I felt so guilty
Yeah.
leaving her, uh, that, I went into the restroom at the park we were at or whatever, and I had this instant thing of, "Man, I shouldn't be alive," or something like that, and I look back and
Yeah.
like, that is really insignificant, but I had those feelings. Now, of course, knowing my trauma journey, there may have been a whole lot more behind it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
You
it doesn't
never
matter if it's little things or big things. It matters
Right.
to us, and it matters to the Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely and sometimes it is the little things, and the little things sometimes trigger the big things, and sometimes the little things are just like you said, there's a mountain underneath them,
Yeah.
and you're just seeing that tip of the iceberg or the something poking through the surface. I think that's important to emphasize that if at least what I've seen it both in my life and with other people, it's just something sometimes those tiny things that seem overwhelming in the moment or that trigger those huge feelings like, "I shouldn't be alive," and you think, "Gosh, why did I think that? Because of this?" I mean, honestly, this is not equating, but that's a clue.
Mhm.
That's a clue that there's something else going on, something you need to caretake and develop and research and figure out why is that happening? That's a clue for trauma underneath the surface
Yeah.
that you're not may not remember at that time, but probably is there at some point. Yeah.
And I think the church has done a real disservice. We were talking a little bit earlier about and you mentioned it too, just put the happy face on, pretend everything is wonderful, and stuff everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so ingrained in society that everybody's fine, we're all fine, kids are fine, parents are fine. It's all good, 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 good. Job's good, car's good, nothing bad ever happens to my house. I think we need to start getting real with one another.
Yes.
Getting real is so powerful, even if it hurts in the moment. And I say that as someone who I can't talk about my own story at this point.
Mhm.
I can talk about other people's stories. I can write about other people's stories, but I can't put my own down on paper yet.
Yeah.
But that's okay. It'll
Yeah.
come eventually. Um, and in the meantime, you can gather strength from other people who have been through different experiences in life. One of the most I watch a lot of weird YouTube channels, less now than I did before. I used to watch a wide variety of things. I am not anywhere near a ballerina, nor do I really enjoy the genre of ballet, but I happened onto this one lady's, website, and she was a really young, up and coming, probably headed for prima ballerina status in
Mhm.
some of the best ballet company in the world, and she had her horrible thing happen to her thyroid, and so she was gaining a lot of weight and eating almost nothing and,
Mhm.
doing ballet however many hours a day they do it at the elite level, so her physique was going downhill fast and people were noticing, and I got to witness her, like, fall apart on camera at
Mm.
one point and just pour it all out, and she put it out on her YouTube channel. There was 5 or 6 or 7 of these videos, and she's talked for years about her journey through that,
Yeah.
basically, in a way, ruined that trajectory of her career,
Mhm.
um, but at the same time she pushed through it, and she pushed and pushed and pushed until she got to a place where It's not the same as it would have been, but
Mhm.
maybe it's better. You just don't know. I think for me, those kinds of stories, wherever you find them, whether it's in the SRA or the RA community or ballet or, wherever, I take a lot of inspiration from them. I really
Definitely.
do. And
Yeah.
it's like, "Oh, man, all these crappy things I don't wanna talk about in public, all this crud that's happened to me, guess what? Somebody else may have gone through it too." And
Right.
God bless them for being willing to say it out loud.
Yeah. It's been a real journey for me, and I'm still, not, big at putting myself out there, particularly, social media and things like that. I'm just like, you know, I
Yeah,
but, they ingrained in me so strong to be perfect and to only present, the good and all of that. I was really blessed by a pastor, in my young adult years that was very vulnerable, from the pulpit, which is very rare.
mm,
And, I got to be part of, leading a prayer team for him as well, and particularly for the prayer team being vulnerable. And, um, it really, really changed my life, and
yeah,
allowed me to learn how to be open, things that I said, "Oh, I would never ever say that," share this with anybody. Um, being able to open up about, my own struggles and so on. And so I agree with you. I'm so grateful for, pioneers who have opened that door of vulnerability and openness,
yeah.
to help, those of us who, it's a little more of a struggle and it might take us a little longer to get there. Um,
Yeah. Well,
but
I
it
know that the bits that you've shared with me have been incredibly helpful. Even just now looking forward to the some of the blogs I'm working on just this week. I'm doing one on a sub project of MK Ultra called Project Talent. And
mm,
there's not a whole lot of information out there about Project Talent, but some of the things that you've shared with me definitely dovetail with some of the things I've heard from other people about this particular project. So I think that's the important thing for me too. Somebody on Twitter called me a compiler. I compile information, and that's really the state of things at this point and has been for a while. First learning about kind of the background stuff. The first year was kind of like a crash course and oh my goodness. And
mhm,
then I, started to bring in as I started to bring in other people's stories and experiences, man, they just dovetail.
yeah,
Yours dovetails with other people's. It just is incredibly powerful to see all of these things that have happened to so many people that are such a struggle for them to share, and I'm like, "Well, gosh, that thing that you thought was incredibly horrible, which was incredibly horrible, this other person had the same incredibly horrible experience." And once it comes into the consciousness of the public, they're gonna be horrified and want it to stop. I think that's the goal.
yeah,
We wanna raise awareness, do it safely,
mhm,
and do it so that other people they can't ignore it anymore. They've been
yes,
able to ignore it for so long that it's astonishing. It's just astonishing to me that it's gone on for so long and it's not in the public consciousness. I think these books that I'm reading, they were written in, the early 1990s.
yeah,
Why have I not heard from that about them until after 2000? What's
yeah.
wrong with this that we don't know about this gigantic evil empire that has secretly run the world, looks like, for a long time? I just don't like that secretiveness.
Yeah. And I think it's also so helpful for survivors, because when things do surface, it feels so crazy making, and
Mhm.
it's so helpful to finally, hear and, other experiences
Other
and to go,
accounts,
"Oh,
yeah.
okay, I'm not crazy. This is, happening in other places." And it was kind of funny for me because I'd watched Jessie for, maybe a year or so, and I had reached out on every way I knew how to reach to her, because some of, my journey involved some of the same people in her journey, and it was
Right.
that thing of, I just need to see if I'm, totally crazy,
Mhm.
or if this might have some validity. And, it was so helpful to finally connect with her. The funny thing was the first time I met her, she had talked in some of her interviews about, older girls in the system that had been really mean to her and stuff. And, because I don't have a lot of memories of my journey, they're still coming. It was like,
Yeah.
oh no, what if I'm one of those mean girls? And so when we met in person for the first time and she gave me a hug, it was like, oh, okay, I must not be one of those mean girls.
Oh, goodness. I think even if you were, she would probably have forgiven you anyway. She's got a lot of grace for a lot of people. I still
Yeah.
don't have quite as much grace as I think she has. But yeah. Yeah. It's something.
Well, and I wanted to say too that I just so appreciate your blogs. And because it's a different medium and because you compile, um, it has a different impact than all of the interviews. And I appreciate interviews. But it was interesting because I had listened to all of Jesse's Gateway Experience
Mhm.
interviews,
Yeah.
and it had not triggered me. And then you came out with your blog, and even though I'd watched all the interviews, and so I almost was like, "Oh, I already know all this." I almost
Right.
skipped your blog. But what was so interesting is I got halfway through one of them, and it totally triggered, some memory in some parts,
Uh,
that initially was tough, but it led to some beautiful healing. And so I just wanna
oh, that's
thank you,
wonderful.
because it was a real gift to me, your, in printed words, what you share.
Thank you. I don't often hear back from people who have been impacted by what I've written.
Yeah.
Bits and pieces here and there. I was actually given a little I said at one point to God, "Hey, I'm not am I am I supposed to still be doing this? Like, yeah, all right, so I'm working really hard because this stuff takes a long time to do,
Mhm.
and it's kinda not it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. Like, is it worth it? Is it worth my time? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing?" Kind of a deal. And the image I got back was that of a pond, a very still surface of a pond, and a rock throwing into the pond and the ripples that it creates.
Yes.
And I was essentially shown that I am only gonna see the first ripple.
Yeah.
So I thought, "Well, okay, that's worth it then." I don't mind not seeing the effects as long as I know that it's gonna have positive effects for people. Um,
It really, really does, and I so honor you and, Kathy Fox and others who, are involved in that compilation because
yeah.
uh, to me, it's easier to comprehend, and see, sometimes things that get lost in an interview. It's really helpful.
Yeah, sometimes things do get lost in an interview. Sometimes they're really hard to find, and sometimes it's the bits that tie it all together.
Mhm.
Um, so that's been a challenge for me is pulling together all the little tiny bits and pieces and being able to find the tiny pieces of the bits. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm 45 minutes into searching for this. I know it's here. Where is it? Or my computer's acting up and I have to reformat the
Mm.
whole folder that everything's in because suddenly it won't pull up a search. I know this is there. I just saw it the other day. I know it was this word. How come you're not pulling up a search? So even those kinds of problems, like frustrating problems like that have led me to better technology, better systems. So I've got a system right now that I don't have everything quite loaded into it, but I've got enough so that if I search something, it actually comes up, which is a miracle.
Yeah.
And um and it comes quickly and I can scroll through the results really quickly. It's so easy to see. So that's been a blessing too. That's been something that one of the people that helps me out with some of the technology that I've implemented introduced to me. And so I'm really, really grateful for that. Really grateful. And the nice thing about this, and the thing that I hope, you know, enhances this ripple effect, is that with this new system, I can essentially take a folder with 10,000 documents in it.
Mhm.
I can compress it, I can email it to someone, and they have my entire research database
Wow. Wow.
because nobody should have to recreate what I've created. But
Yes.
I can say, okay, so yes, what's today? Tuesday? Yesterday was the first time I've had a guest blogger, and she wrote an incredible piece. Just a really lovely personal experience from when she was a kid. It ties into Jesse's affidavits about Baraboo, Wisconsin.
Mhm.
It ties into child trafficking and removal of demons and other entities from the home. It was just really lovely, well written and exciting to see and to be able to bring her on board. But I can now take my entire database and hand it over to her or whoever.
That is awesome, and I like to, because again, just little pieces from here and there that you're bringing has opened my eyes to, new resources and new, survivors to explore, and so that has been really, really helpful for me as well. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, good. Someone called me and I think, I don't know, I haven't read the piece that they wrote, but I believe it was about me, and they called me a fake survivor advocate. And I thought, ooh, that's so interesting because I've never thought of myself as a survivor advocate, but maybe I am, and that'd be lovely. And I'll
Yeah,
just toss the fake part right out the
yeah,
window. Maybe I'll adopt that. I like that.
I do.
Thank
I
you
love
very
that
much.
survivor advocate. Yes.
That's pretty cool. I'm always up for constructive criticism that I can then take the parts of that I like and throw the rest out the window. But that
It's
takes time too.
yeah,
That's a process of self-awareness that if you've been through a lot of trauma in your life, it takes a while to get to that point.
yeah,
Back to the people who were kind of cruel to you in saying what they said. Can you take that and process it through your mind, or does it have to process through your emotions and your body? And
yes,
sometimes it has to process through your emotions and your body. And then sometimes you can get to a point of strength where you process it through your mind instead.
yeah,
You just go, "Is this true? Is this not true?" I'm gonna think about it for a little while. Maybe it is, and if that's the case, I'll move in this direction, and maybe it's not, and if that's the case, I'm just gonna discard it as interesting but unhelpful information.
yeah.
And then we go forward from that.
Well, and that's the thing is that, what they shared, has some truth in it. And so, I was able to take that to the Lord and go, okay, show me, you know, um, how it was done and the rejection and abandonment of relationship. That part to me isn't Jesus.
Yeah,
And so like, in agreement is separating out, okay, what of this information do I need and do I take? And what parts of it do I go, okay, that's not from Jesus. That's
yeah,
not what I want to participate in.
yeah. I think we're not taught, well, there's so much we're not taught, but we're really not taught even in school how to be constructive with one another. Like, how do you tell someone, and that really, in my opinion, needs to start at a much younger age,
Yeah.
How do you tell someone kindly, but with, centered in your own person?
Hmm.
"Hey, maybe you could take a look at this.
Yeah.
This is what I feel." And do it gently. And then the other
Yes.
person can receive it gently as well.
Yes.
But so much of what goes on is almost an attack.
Yeah.
And then you feel like you have to defend yourself, or your body feels attacked, or your emotions feel attacked. I think that's something that we could work on as a culture much more. It needs to improve because we really could do each other a lot of favors just by gently saying truth.
Yes. And I've learned so much through this, and that was a big piece of it. Is that my personality is I don't want to hurt anyone, and if I'm hurting anyone, and that was kind of the thing that came up
Yeah,
is like I'm hurting people, then take me out. I shouldn't
right,
be here.
right.
Um, but as I processed it with the Lord, it was this place of, they were like, that's a defense system
Yeah,
that's keeping you from living the fullness of life. And it's actually not wanting to hurt someone is the foundation of people pleasing.
yeah,
because then we don't have authentic relationship because we're afraid of, saying something to other people that's going to hurt them instead of being honest about how we may be feeling. And so it's been powerful to, even with the Lord, in the recent, days and weeks, being able to express some things to people that in the past I would have been like, oh, I don't want to hurt them. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm not going to say that. There is a way to say it and to stay in community that I think is the key part of that.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think so
with
too.
with this other group, a lot of it had to do with fear, um,
Mm.
which isn't ever from God, and
No.
there is places where we need to step back from relationships, as the Lord leads, but also not from a place of fear, not from a place of, oh, I'm going to be contaminated, by that person or something like that. And so, anyway,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think too, and I didn't learn this as a kid. I had to learn it as an adult, how to have an argument with someone or how to have a disagreement with someone and have things come out better on the other end than they
yes.
went going in. I hadn't ever experienced that before. I'd always experienced kind of a crush, to the point when I was a kid that I just didn't bring it up.
Yeah.
It just never got addressed because I knew that there was never a result that was gonna happen that would be beneficial for anybody. So the
Mhm.
best thing was to just stay silent. So when I had these experiences later on in life where I got angry or I brought up something that was irritating to me and there was a resolution and it was positive and I saw that, hey, we can come through this, both of us on the other side, and it's good. It's actually even better. Woohoo! I like that. I think a lot of people, a lot of families don't do that very well, especially families in generational trauma or
Mhm.
generational Freemasonry or all these other things that kind of inhibit the ability for communication to really be effective. So
Yes.
it's good. I personally, in thinking about what you have said about I don't want to hurt anybody. Sometimes there's a little bit of hurt that can happen that can
Mhm.
wind up with a whole lot of healing.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
that's the place we all wanna get to. We wanna minimize the potential bad feelings and definitely not go the disaster route, but kinda dip into that, this is uncomfortable to say, but I'm gonna say it anyway because I
Yeah.
think we can come out on the other side and be so much stronger and be so much better off." Yeah.
Absolutely. So good. And
Restoration in a relationship, right? How to
yes.
restore it, it may have gone off the track a little bit, let's get it back on track and move forward.
Yeah. And I'm believing that for the situation, I went through last month, is believing that the Lord has a place of restoration. If it's not in this lifetime, it will be, in eternity. And so I can rest in that.
Yep.
Because sometimes you run into relationships where you just can't work through some things. And at that point, being able to go, okay, there will be a day when everything will be brought out into the light.
Yeah.
And, there's places where I'm, didn't see and I'm going to have to take responsibility for and on their half as well.
Yeah.
But I think that learning to walk in authenticity is so powerful. And, I grew up in a home where we just smiled and stuffed everything.
Yeah.
And so I was never really exposed to raised voices. It was kind of interesting. I think um, I was probably 16 or 17, and I was upstairs, and my mother and my brother were having a conversation that got a little louder than normal, and I was just upstairs in agony over it,
Mm,
and
yeah.
ultimately they
Yeah.
they were fine, um, but, when you're raised in that and never hear anger, never hear anything, and then, of course, I would marry, an angry, depressed man.
Mm,
And, and so the first 25 years of our marriage, my husband's public about this, otherwise I wouldn't share, but,
yeah.
was challenging. And so it was always walking on eggshells and not wanting to
Mm,
set his anger off and just trying
right.
to manage. but then, learning for myself, my own breakthrough that I can have emotions and I
Mhm.
can, express them. We can work through things,
Yeah.
has been a journey.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, it is, isn't it? Learning how to be human.
Yes.
That whole process of how do we do this? There's a manual, but it it doesn't really sometimes it's hard to find the exact instructions. You gotta kinda make your own manual some of the time. Oh, yeah.
Well, and I'm so grateful that the Bible, is not sanitized. Um,
Yeah.
and we have the record of the Psalms where you've got people just going, God, rip them apart, kill them, send them to hell forever and ever, you know?
Right.
But then it ends up, okay, Lord, you are powerful. I'm going to trust in you. And
Mhm.
I'm so grateful that the Bible doesn't um, shows the full range.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
obviously
yeah.
there's better ways to handle things than others, but we get to
Huh.
grow and watch the grace of the Lord work in our lives.
Yeah. The one of the other prayers I've stumbled on, kind of recently is in Dan Duval's books. He's got 3 books of prayers.
Yeah.
He's got a couple of prayers in the 2nd book, and he's compiled basically all of the weapons of war against the enemy, and boy, there are a lot of them. There's some pretty powerful stuff in there. It's like, "Okay, send the chariots of God and demolish them all," um, and this and tripwires and snares and glory bombs and, so there's
Yes.
there's a lot of, uh there's a lot of violent activity against the forces of darkness in the Bible. I didn't even realize that before I read those prayers. I'm like, "I'm gonna have to go back and read all of these passages," because at present moment, I kinda like the idea of having that sort of powerful weaponry at my disposal. Again, that's not something that, you know, mainstream Protestant Christianity will ever tell you, "Hey, there are weapons of war against the evil ones." Evil ones? What are you talking about? Evil ones? We don't have any evil ones. But yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a learning process.
And I think there's a beautiful paradox of love and mercy and judgment and justice.
Mhm.
And sometimes people, you know, swing further one way or the other. I tend to be a little more on the mercy side and restoration side and love side focused. But that's part of my design.
Yeah.
But I think that when we are able to embrace both of these things, I was reading Ezekiel this morning, and it was in the Passion Translation, which at least is a little softer, but it was still, the things that Ezekiel, had to do and proclaim was going to happen to the Israelites because of disobedience was pretty, pretty hard,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yet, the Lord's ultimate goal, I believe, in all of it, is restoration.
Yeah.
Um, so we get to
Exactly.
walk out that balance together.
Mm. It's a walk, isn't it? It's a walk on the wild side.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I can laugh about it, but I don't always laugh about it. Sometimes I cry through it, and sometimes I get pretty ticked off. But that's, for all of us, we're all walking the walk.
Yeah.
We really are.
And I think part of it is having set in our minds that yes, we need to be able to see that the enemy is at work and he is powerful, but at the same time, God is way more powerful than any of it.
Yeah.
And we don't want to get stuck in fear.
No.
All of us, particularly survivors, we have fear layered into us. And I used to
Right.
just hate when my husband would quote that, perfect love casts out fear. And it was like, well, you're saying I don't have any love because
Right.
I've got all
Yeah.
this fears going on.
Yeah.
But just grace for ourselves as we're working through all of those things. But I find that the more I focus on the power of God to overcome, the better.
Yeah.
And there was a time several years ago when, memories were coming forward, and um, I heard this phrase in my heart, Book of Secrets. And I knew that I had, um, I didn't have conscious memory of it, but I knew that I had a whole bunch of information that if they knew that I knew
Mm.
that, I would be taken out. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
went through probably 2 or 3 days of just paranoia because it was like, "Oh, no, I can't even reach out to my counselor because they're monitoring my phones, they're monitoring
Yeah.
everything, and,
Yeah.
I can't," uh, you know?
Yeah.
And finally, I had to come to the point of going, "I have to believe that my life is in God's hands and that
Right.
He is more powerful, and I don't wanna live in this paranoia, fear, place."
No.
And so
It's
that's where I have to keep coming back to, on
Yep.
this journey.
Yep. Terror and fear are really powerful, and from what I can gather, they're it's the number one weapon
Yeah,
of the occult to keep people in line.
yeah,
Just fear of absolutely anything they can make you afraid of, they will make you afraid of.
yes.
And it's a prison with no bars, right?
Mhm,
If you just step outside of it, but the 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 imagine the bars that they have created for you that are in your mind that are essentially imaginatory. I know
mhm.
that's not a word, but my brain's not pulling up the right one at the moment. Um, the ones that you've created that you can see so very clearly,
Yeah,
are really powerful. They're really, really, really powerful. And it
yes.
takes a while to work through fear. It takes a long time to work through terror. It takes a long time to one of the most powerful, and I don't think people know about this. So, um, before Sarah Westall had Jessie Zaboter on her program, she ran Jessie's voice print through Sherry Edwards. I don't know if you're familiar with Sherry Edwards. Sherry Edwards has a proprietary and astonishing voice print.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it's a computer program or something that she uses. She
Mhm,
created it, and she has the ability to hear certain frequencies in people's voices, but also the computer can analyze certain tones and notes and things.
mhm.
And so she analyzed Jesse's voice because Sarah was like, "I don't know if this lady is for real or not for real or whatnot," you know? Sherry's also analyzed, a lot of the political figures, etcetera, and she'll come up with things, and you're like, "Yeah, I can see that," and then most of it's very negative.
Yeah,
But basically what she said about Jessie, Sherry's voice print analysis was that she's terrified, and she's got a big story to tell, and she's gonna push through it, right?
wow.
So, um and I believe that's still out online, and if it's not, I think I've got it in the reference section of my blog, which I'm pushing almost 1,000. I'm getting to 1,000 transcripts, which has been a journey in and of itself, up there. So it's also a resource that people can use if they wanna go there, and you can search one word and come up with every transcript that has that word in it, which I
Yeah,
think is also a useful tool to have if you're trying to find something within this particular genre.
yeah.
What was my point? So I lost my train of thought. I was going somewhere.
About fear?
Fear, yeah, so you can have that fear and you can push through it, and you can make it out the other side, and it's okay. It doesn't, you don't have to set time limits on yourself either,
Yeah,
but you can also reframe it and say, "I can live life in fear or I can live life without fear," and it's okay to put um, you know, reasonable measures in place so that you're comfortable. That's okay.
yes.
It's
Yeah,
alright to do, but constant living in fear is gonna hinder your overall life and enjoyment of life. But that's a difficult one to get over because, boy, the terror, the fear, the threats, and they do it on oh, this is another thing I'm looking at. Svali has in her book Svali wrote a book with her daughter,
mhm,
and in the book, she talks about cell phones and how they use cell phones to incite fear in survivors as well, especially those who are trying to escape the group.
mhm.
So things like sending them videos of people getting uh, tortured, for lack of a better term,
Yeah,
flashing images in front of them that are kind of subliminal and making them um, feel fear and not know why, or giving them messages about returning to the cult, or just amazing stuff. They've got so many different ways to not just instill fear with trauma or torture or whatever they do when they're young, but also then to continue it throughout the person's life. So
Yeah.
the cell phone kind of becomes a prison as well. It's amazing. It's amazing to me what the lengths that they go to make sure that you are not just a slave, not just trapped, but trapped horribly. It's
Yes.
awful. It's awful. And it's awful in a way that it's taken me a long time to there's a hump, right? There's a initial shock, and then
Mhm.
you go through the grief of realizing this has happened to so many people,
Yeah.
and then you go through the anger stage, like, "I cannot believe this has happened to people. I cannot believe that they forced you to do what they forced you to do." And then you get to the, "Hmm, okay, what are we gonna do about
Yes.
it? Let's get moving." So, yeah,
And for survivors, it's almost every memory, y you go
yeah,
through that process, and, I'm at various stages in different memories, but the more and more I can get to that, acceptance and a restoration perspective, like, "Okay, God, here this is. Now,
yeah,
what do you want to do about this? How
mhm,
can I release forgiveness? How can I
yeah,
release your love? How can I release restoration?"
yeah,
Um, and for me, that seeing that there's a redemptive side of it, that he does work all things together for good,
yep.
is what keeps me in the game. Because otherwise it's just like, this really sucks, you know?
Yeah, yeah, there has to be a good come out of it,
Yeah.
which you can make happen, and I can try to make happen, and other people are working hard at making happen. One of the difficulties these days is trying to keep up with the people who are starting to speak, and I'm
Yes.
really glad to see that there are people starting to speak and more coming out and in their stories, and they make my life a little bit more difficult because I got a lot more stuff I gotta collect. I'm like, "Oh, what do you mean you have 3 videos out this week alone? Oh my word. Okay. I gotta add an extra hour onto that task for today."
Yep.
But it's good. It is good, and it's gonna blow the lid open, and I can't wait to see that. It's a very exciting time to live through. It's very
Yes.
exciting to watch this unfold. It's heartbreaking, but it's also, um, it's historic, you know? We're watching the end of a system. I believe that
Yes.
it's not working so well. You look out and you see, "Okay, it's not working so well for him in certain ways. Good.
Yes.
They're struggling
Yes.
here. Good."
We know the end of the story, and
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
the good news.
Exactly.
Well, I think we'll wrap that up today, but I look forward to having you on again, Veronica. This has been so delightful just being able to share and talk through, um, all kinds of
Yeah.
little nuggets
Good
and good
stuff.
nuggets here and there, and, any last thing you'd like to share?
I've just really enjoyed this, and thank you for saying so many nice things about the blog and the book, and the book is free. It's on my website. If you go to veronicaswift.blog, B-L-O-G, you can find the book, you can download it in PDF form and read it. If you're just encountering this kind of information, you're like, "What on earth are they talking about?" It will walk you through my journey of discovery and, my the emotional state I went through learning it, and just the basics of what are we talking about? What is this brotherhood thing? What's the occult? Why is it so important? And what are they doing to people, and what have they done to people? So,
Yeah.
read it if you haven't read it. It's worth checking out. It'll at least give you a perspective that you maybe didn't have before. So, yeah, I look forward to coming back on. That sounds delightful.
All right. Thank you so much, and I do encourage people to read your blogs and the book. It is, very, very, very good and life-changing. So, anyway, just thank you for being on today. We just bless
Mhm.
you
Thank
and
you.
hope that the things that we have shared encourage, inspire, and, keep you on your journey, of
Thank you,
walking with
yeah.
the Lord. And so we will see you next time on
Yes.
Testimony Mountain.